Hi, Colin Donahue here. This is going to be a follow-up to my previous talk on basic ethics. So I'm going to bring up a few concepts, a few terms that are related to what I was speaking about previously to help clarify what's most fundamentally important concerning so-called complicated issues and whether they're ethically sound or not, whether they're justifiable or not. So I've talked previously about preemptive attack not being legitimate, and I explained how it's not legitimate by using the example of, could I do this to someone else randomly in society? Could I go up to someone on the street and do this? If not, then it's not ethically sound, right? So could I go up to someone on the street and say, um, you know, you seem fine right now, but you may actually have a sickness and not know it. And because of that possibility, I am now going to coerce or otherwise force you to utilize a certain medical device and or take a certain medical treatment, i.e. ingest or inject something into your body that I deem would be best for preventing the possibility of you harming someone else, even though there's no signs that you are sick or are harming anyone else. Here's my prescription, and you have no option as to whether you're going to follow it or not. And if you refuse to follow it, I'm going to commit aggression against you, either physically or through economic coercion, restricting your life in ways that are going to coerce you into complying. Now, if I just walked up to someone on the street and said that, I think it's safe to say most, if not all people would reject my proposition. They would say, I don't need to follow your medical advice just because you think it's a good idea. Like, you don't own my body. You're not my master. Who do you think you are, right? Something along those lines would probably be the response. Because what I'm suggesting to do is not ethically legitimate. I'm basically saying, I'm going to be your master because I think it's a good idea, because I say so. It's just not legitimate. So preemptive attack is not legitimate. You can't commit aggression against someone because you think they might harm someone else, right? This is just basic ethics, right? This is just, and it's like common sense. Like I said, if someone came up to you on the street and tried to commit a preemptive attack against you, you would most likely refuse it. You'd say, you can't harm me because you think I might harm someone else. It's like, you can't punch me because you think I might punch someone else. It's just completely ridiculous. It's completely unsound ethically, right? So that's preemptive attack. And what goes along with preemptive attack is something you've probably heard many, many times, which is innocent before proven guilty, right? And the title for this in legal terms is the presumption of innocence. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You can't charge someone with being guilty just because you think they're guilty. There needs to be proof that they're guilty of whatever you're accusing them of. And so the presumption of innocence is actually considered a human right. And I'll link to an article that talks about the presumption of innocence in the context of human rights and various political documents and in various religious scripture. Again, this is just goes hand in hand with rejecting preemptive attack. The presumption of innocence is just basic ethics. The opposite of the presumption of innocence is the presumption of guilt, where you're assuming someone's guilty before innocent. And this is related to preemptive attack because what always follows, or what is likely to follow the presumption of guilt, is the preemptive attack. So prior to a preemptive attack is basically the presumption of guilt. It's like, well, I think you may be guilty, or you, if not now, in the future, and so therefore I can commit some aggression against you now. It's a presumption of guilt followed by a preemptive attack. Again, not legitimate at all. And the two other terms I wanted to mention here that are related to this basic ethical perspective, which is crucial to focus on whenever evaluating whatever political or social phenomena is occurring, for example, with the whole lockdown situation, how much preemptive attack is legitimate, or the response should be zero, right? Just as there's zero preemptive attack against a stranger on the street that's legitimate, there's zero that anyone else can do. And the only reason why you would think that it's complicated or that it's somehow different is if you think that certain individuals have special rights. So this is another term to keep in mind and to utilize when making an argument against this, is that nobody has special rights. And related to this, you can say no one has an exemption from morality. So those two are connected. The special right for what? The special right to be exempt from morality, and that specifically being in this context preemptive attack. So if someone is presumed to have a special right to commit aggression, a special right that they are exempt from the basic ethical morality that we've been discussing, which is that preemptive attack is not legitimate, aggression is not legitimate, abuse is not legitimate, then we can come to a clear, keeping all of these terms and this philosophy, this simple ethical philosophy in mind, we can come to a conclusion that it's not legitimate to commit preemptive attack, period. And that's for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a regular so-called person or if you're a so-called authority or an official. No one is exempt from morality and given the special right to commit preemptive attack. No one has the right to abuse someone else, even if they think it might be for the benefit of the whole, right? Even if they say it's for the greater good, you don't have the right to abuse an individual because you think, or because you say at least, it could be deceptive. They don't really think it's for the greater good, but they want to commit the aggression anyway for their advantage. No one has the right to abuse another person under any circumstance, ever, period. Like, this is the moral absolutism that people have been so indoctrinated to avoid because moral relativism has been pushed so ubiquitously throughout, the education system and culture and mass media, etc., academia especially, where for someone to just take a solid position, a, no exceptions position that abuse is never acceptable, period, because people are so indoctrinated to not have that as a possible moral conclusion, they think this is a more complicated issue than it really is, but it's not. It's not okay to abuse someone. Aggression is a form of abuse. Deception and cheating is a form of abuse. Belittlement is a form of abuse, and it's never good to do those things. They're just evil. It doesn't make the world a better place to do evil. Evil is just evil. That's what, that is the, it's not always a gray area. Some things are completely wrong, completely evil, right? And namely aggression, belittlement, and deception, which are all forms of abuse. So to simply, to put one term on it, abuse is never legitimate. Abuse is evil. So if there's some crisis in the world, doing evil doesn't make the world a better place. You just added evil to a bad situation, right? You just made matters worse. So this is the demystifying, this is the way to see through all the propaganda and determine what's really good and evil, what's really legitimate and what's not. If someone is proposing, or if someone is committing a preemptive attack and they're presuming you guilty before innocent, if they're saying, I have special rights, I'm exempt from basic morality, and I have the right to abuse you, you should say, no, you don't. That's bullshit. You're full of it, whether you know it, whether you're aware that this is bullshit or not, and you're doing it deceptively, or you're just ignorant of basic ethics. Either way, it's wrong, and I do not accept what you're doing. And if I were to accept it, I'm legitimizing, I'm condoning abuse, which is not good for me, others, or future generations. So, again, if someone is trying to control your body because they say it's going to possibly prevent something, that's preemptive attack, not legitimate. No exemption from basic morality, no special rights for anybody, and no presumption of guilt. If these could be commonly understood and discussed elements of morality, there would be hope for humanity. But if these ideas, if these basic ethical principles are continuously discarded and sidelined, marginalized, and everyone is just caught up in the propaganda and the appeal to emotion, appeal to authority, the guilt tripping, and all of the supposed rationalizations and justifications of preemptive attack, and the labeling of anyone who's resisting or objecting, labeling them selfish or bad, this projection of those rejecting abuse as if they are somehow evil themselves. No, they're rejecting evil. That's a good thing to do. You're not evil for rejecting evil. You're good for doing that. So, again, basic ethics, people, and I hope you'll contemplate these principles, discuss them with others, and get it in the conversation so that the abuse on this massive scale, now global scale, doesn't continue without being rejected on a fundamental level as discussed here. All right, thank you for listening.